Hi, my name is Mike. I'm 35. I work as a manager at an IT company, and I live in the suburbs of Chicago. My wife Emily is an elementary school teacher, and she also has a mom, Catherine, who is my mother-in-law. Catherine is an activist and volunteer, always busy with some charity events. My relationship with my mother-in-law is hard to call close. No, we don't fight or hate each other, we just don't communicate too much, let's say. Catherine thinks I'm a bore and a careerist, and I think she's an eccentric idealist. But for Emily's sake, we try to maintain neutrality. Everything changed a month ago when we got together for a family dinner. Catherine, as usual, was sharing news about her volunteer exploits, and Emily suddenly said, "Mom, that's amazing. Listen, maybe Mike and I could somehow participate in charity work too, help organize some event or fundraiser." I nearly dropped my fork. I'm not really a fan of all this volunteer stuff. But then Catherine got excited. "Great idea, dear. Actually, right now we're planning a big fundraising campaign for a homeless animal shelter. If you want, you can join in." Emily beamed and looked at me. What choice did I have? I couldn't let my wife and mother-in-law down by saying the topic didn't inspire me. So I put on a smile and nodded in agreement. Oh, if only I knew what I was getting into then. The next day, Catherine and I met to discuss the details of the upcoming campaign. My mother-in-law was full of enthusiasm. Okay, we need to find sponsors, arrange a venue, attract volunteers, plan out the evening's program. Mike, can you handle the sponsors? You have a ton of business connections. I wanted to object that my connections were unlikely to be thrilled about the idea of chipping in for a dog shelter. But then I imagined how disappointed Emily would be if I bailed, and reluctantly nodded. Okay, I'll try to talk to some people, but no promises. As a result, over the next couple of weeks, Catherine and I worked like crazy. We called potential sponsors, searched for volunteers, negotiated renting a hall. My mother-in-law was unrecognizable. Gone was her frivolity and silliness. She ran me ragged, controlled every little detail, and stayed up nights herself writing the script for the evening. And you know what? Looking at her like that, focused, businesslike, driven, I suddenly caught myself thinking that she was damn attractive. I mean, I had noticed before that Catherine was good-looking, but now my perception seemed to have stepped up to a new level. I started noticing her sculpted figure, her expressive eyes, her soft lips. Whoa, stop right there. What kind of fantasies are these? Am I checking out my own mother-in-law? Have I completely lost it over this charity stuff? I should be figuring things out with my own wife, and here I am, ogling her mother. Shame on you, Mike. But as embarrassing as it is to admit, thoughts of Catherine started visiting me more and more often, and not just in the context of our joint project. I started imagining hugging her, kissing her, stroking her silky hair. Damn, what's wrong with me? I definitely need to work less and sleep more. Otherwise, I'm clearly going crazy from lack of sleep and exhaustion. The closer the charity evening got, the worse I felt. First, because of the organizational hassles, not everything was going smoothly, despite mine and Catherine's efforts. Sponsors were being stubborn. There were problems with the venue. Volunteers were screwing up. We had to improvise on the fly, which was hellishly exhausting. And secondly, and most importantly, my thoughts and fantasies about my mother-in-law were becoming more and more, indecent, let's say. I caught myself constantly admiring her legs in a miniskirt, imagining running my hand over her thighs. Damn, I was practically drowning in thoughts of her. And the thing is, I couldn't do anything about it. It was like some kind of obsession. Catherine wasn't helping matters either. She would accidentally touch my hand, or bend over so I could see right down her cleavage, and her looks and smiles, as if she was flirting, provoking me. Although maybe it just seemed that way to me. Maybe I'm just going crazy from a lack of you-know-what and imagining things. One day we were preparing for a meeting with potential sponsors. For some reason, Catherine reached for some papers on the top shelf of a cabinet, and I, like the last idiot, stared at her butt, coquettishly hugged by her skirt. And then my mother-in-law apparently lost her balance and started to fall. I barely managed to catch her, pressing her to me. "Oh, thanks, Mike," Catherine breathed, looking up at me. "What would I do without you?" At that moment, I felt myself getting turned on. Her breasts were pressed against mine, her eyes were dancing with mischief, her lips were so close. A little more and I wouldn't have been able to restrain myself. Swearing, I quickly pulled away and muttered, "Let's get back to work. There's no time for romance here." The rest of the day passed in awkward silence. We carefully avoided looking at each other and kept our interactions to a minimum. But the tension didn't go anywhere. Damn, it only got stronger. A little more and sparks would start flying. I definitely need to do something about this. It can't go on like this. And then it arrived. D-Day, our charity evening. A lot of people came. The sponsors were generous. The program was great. Catherine and I ran around like mad, greeting guests, overseeing the organization, giving speeches from the stage. Everything was going just wonderfully. Towards the end of the evening, when the donation amount had surpassed several tens of thousands of dollars, Catherine came up behind me and whispered in my ear, "We did it, Mike. You're just incredible." Her hot breath sent shivers down my spine, and when I turned around and saw her glowing face, I felt like I was getting drunk, either from joy or from the champagne we had been sipping all evening, or from Catherine's proximity. "It's our shared achievement," I whispered back, leaning towards her ear. "I couldn't have done it without you." I don't know what came over me. Probably the emotions and alcohol completely knocked out the last of my common sense, because the next second I was already kissing Catherine, hungrily, passionately, as if for the last time, and she was responding in a way that made sparks fly from my eyes. To hell with decency, to hell with morality. I wanted her like crazy. I don't remember how we ended up in the coat check. I think we just rushed into the first door we saw, just to hide from prying eyes. There, among other people's jackets and coats, I pressed Catherine against the wall and started frantically undressing her, pulled off her dress, kissed her neck and collarbones, caressed her thighs. My mother-in-law moaned in my ear and clawed at my back through my shirt. It was insanity. Pure insanity. I don't know what would have happened next if it wasn't for the knock on the door and Emily's anxious voice. "Mike, Mom, are you in there? We've been looking all over for you. It's time for the speech." We jumped apart as if scalded. Catherine's face was frozen in an expression of shock mixed with guilt. Yeah, we really stepped in it this time. Good thing Emily didn't think to come in, or there would have been a huge scandal. "We're coming, dear," Catherine replied in a slightly trembling voice. "I just needed to touch up my makeup." Hastily straightening our clothes and smoothing our hair, we went out to the guests, smiling, joking, accepting congratulations. And in my head it was pounding. What have we done? How do we live now? Did I really cheat on my wife with her mother? The next morning was one of the worst in my life. I woke up with an aching head and a heavy heart. Memories of the previous night were slowly surfacing, making me squirm with shame and self-loathing. God, what have I done? How could I do this to Emily, to our family? My wife was sleeping next to me, blissfully smiling in her sleep. I looked at her and felt like the last bastard. Emily didn't deserve such betrayal. She had always been faithful, loving, the best wife in the world to me. And I, a lustful animal, incapable of keeping it in my pants. I'm a scumbag, no exaggeration. I got up and trudged to the kitchen, made coffee, staring stupidly out the window. My head was empty and echoing like a crypt. I have no idea what to do now. Confess to Emily? No, not that. She won't survive it. And frankly, neither will I. Keep it all a secret? Try to forget it, as if nothing happened. I'm afraid it won't work anymore. I'm in too deep. I was distracted from my heavy thoughts by the sound of an incoming message. It was Catherine. My heart jumped. My throat went dry. For a few seconds I stared dumbly at the screen, afraid to open it. Finally, I worked up the nerve. "Mike, we need to talk. Come over today while Emily is at work. It's important." "Yeah, damn right it's important. Dealing with the fallout from our adultery is the #1 issue right now." I replied briefly, "Okay, I'll be there," and started getting ready, trying not to wake my wife. The drive to Catherine's house was pure torture. The whole short trip I kept thinking about what kind of conversation I was in for. Catherine greeted me, and as soon as I entered the house, I plopped down on the couch. Catherine sat across from me, locking her fingers together. Judging by her face, she wasn't having a good time either. We were silent, collecting our thoughts. Finally, my mother-in-law exhaled. "Mike, what happened yesterday? It's terrible, a monstrous mistake. We shouldn't have given in to our emotions." I nodded like a bobblehead. What is there to say? She's 100% right. We both behaved unforgivably. We betrayed Emily, destroyed her trust. Although, in fact, nothing really happened. Just some petting and drunken kisses. But the sediment remained, as they say. I understand. I don't know what came over me myself, I replied dully. Probably stress, lack of sleep, alcohol. Damn, what difference does it make? The point is, we screwed up. And now we have to find a way out somehow. Agreed, Catherine nodded. And the only way out I see is to pretend it never happened. Forget about it once and for all. For Emily's sake and our family's sake. Forget. Easier said than done. As if I don't want to erase this episode from my memory myself. Burn it out with a hot iron. Scrape it out with a file. But there's the problem. It's not working. As soon as I close my eyes, I see Catherine. I hear her moans, feel the heat of her body. I'm going crazy. I swear. You're right. It won't be easy to forget, she said quietly as if reading my mind. But we have to try, for the greater good. So I suggest we keep our interactions to a minimum. No personal meetings or conversations. Only for business and in Emily's presence. Do you understand me? Of course I understand. She's suggesting we pretend I don't exist, that I'm a non-entity. Well, fair enough. I guess it's better for everyone that way, even though it hurts to admit it. Whatever you say, I shrugged. I'll stay away from you. No big deal. Catherine smiled sadly and stood up. She awkwardly patted me on the shoulder as a goodbye and left, and I stayed sitting in the living room staring stupidly at the wall. There was a ringing emptiness in my head. Welcome to the club, Mikey. You're in deep shit now, and now you have to deal with it. The next few weeks dragged on like molasses. I honestly tried to keep our agreement. I kept my interactions with Catherine to a minimum, stayed pointedly aloof. At family gatherings, I sat as far away from her as possible, only talked about business, didn't even look in her direction. Emily didn't notice anything, or pretended not to notice. She was all courtesy, chattering about her school days, making plans for the weekend, and I wanted to howl with longing, from guilt, from unrequited attraction, from powerlessness to change anything. I lost weight, became haggard, became distracted and nervous. Colleagues joked that I must have been replaced by someone else, if only they knew how close they were to the truth. The old Mike died that fateful evening, and the one who remained is just a pale shadow of himself. Catherine kept a cheery front, at least in public. She smiled, joked, discussed the latest news with her daughter, but I could see how dull her eyes were, as if all the joy, all the spark had been sucked out of her. And I understood that it was my fault. I didn't keep an eye out. I didn't hold back. I let it all go too far. One day we accidentally ran into each other in the kitchen while the others were in the living room. Catherine sharply sucked air through her teeth and recoiled as if from a leper. I froze in place, afraid to move. My heart was pounding like crazy. My mouth was dry. For a few seconds we just looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Finally, Catherine blurted out, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Are you okay?" The question sounded so ridiculous in the situation that I couldn't help but snort. "Perfectly fine. How about you? Hanging in there?" She shrugged noncommittally. "I'm trying, for Emily's sake and our family's. I hope you can manage it too." And then she turned and walked out, leaving me alone with my demons. Yeah, I'm managing all right, barely holding on to keep from spilling everything. Every day is a test of endurance. And every day it gets harder to pretend that everything is okay. But there's nowhere to go. For Emily's sake, for our marriage, I'm willing to keep playing these games. Pretend that nothing is gnawing at me. That there was no crazy night, no kisses and confessions, anything to preserve what's left intact. Of course, things will never be the same again. Too much has happened, too deep wounds have been inflicted. But life goes on, and we'll manage somehow. We'll adapt to the new reality, learn to live with it. What choice do we have? Just keep moving forward. Just hold on with the last of our strength. And pray that no one ever finds out our shameful secret. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.